In the glittering cutthroat world of New York's elite tech billionaire Declan Shaw believed he had it all, a 9-figure net worth a reputation as a modern titan, and a beautiful compliant wife, Lauren, quietly waiting at home, pregnant with his heir. Tonight, at the most anticipated art exhibition of the year, he would finally unveil his latest acquisition, a stunning young mistress named Crystal. He planned to cement his status as a man who takes what he wants. But Declan was about to learn a brutal lesson. In a world of carefully curated images, the real masterpiece isn't always the one on the wall. Sometimes it's the quiet woman you underestimated, and she's about to reveal a secret that will burn his entire world to the ground. Declan Shaw loved the scent of new money. It smelled of Italian leather, single malt scotch, and the faint ozonic hum of servers processing billions of data points per second. His penthouse, a glass-walled monstrosity overlooking Central Park, was a temple to his success. Every surface was hard, reflective, and cold, much like the man himself. His company, Nexus Dynamics, had revolutionized data security, and in doing so had made him a king in the new digital aristocracy. His wife, Lauren Stenzler, was the opposite of his world. She was soft-warm and preferred the hushed quiet of their private library to the boisterous charity galas he dragged her to. He had met her 5 years ago at a university fundraiser. She was the daughter of a moderately successful academic, a classics professor, or so he thought. She was beautiful in an understated way, with intelligent grey eyes and a serene smile that seemed out of place in his shark-infested circles. To Declan, she was the perfect accessory, elegant, educated, and utterly unassuming. She was the old-world grace to his new-world power, a beautiful piece of art he had acquired to complete the collection of his life. Lately, she had been even more reclusive. 6 months into a difficult pregnancy, she was often tired, her natural pallor more pronounced. Declan found it inconvenient. "Lauren, sweetheart, are you sure you won't come?" he asked, adjusting the knot of his Tom Ford tie in the reflection of a floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the city lights glittered like a carpet of scattered diamonds. The Gagosian is unveiling Kian Monroe's new collection. It's the event of the season. Everyone will be there. Lauren was curled on a cream-colored chaise lounge, a heavy book on art history resting near her hand. She looked up, her expression weary but calm. "I'm just not feeling up to it, Declan. The doctor said I need to rest." He sighed, a gust of theatrical impatience. "It's always the doctor. You're pregnant, Lauren, not an invalid. A little fresh air would do you good." He ran a hand over his perfectly coiffed dark hair. "Besides, I need you on my arm. It looks good. The devoted couple expecting our first child." "It's not about how it looks," she murmured, placing a protective hand over the gentle swell of her stomach. I can't tonight." Declan's jaw tightened. He saw her hobby, her quiet obsession with art, as a quaint, harmless pastime. She would spend hours reading about obscure Renaissance painters or modern sculptors. He'd occasionally find auction catalogues on her tablet filled with pieces from artists he'd never heard of. He'd indulged it, buying her a few decorative paintings for their home pieces, chosen by his interior designer for their color palette, not their provenance. He believed her interest was shallow, a way for a housewife to feel accomplished. "Fine," he snapped, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Stay home with your books. I have important connections to maintain. Gavin Price will be there, and I need to close that server deal." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture devoid of any warmth. It was a mark of ownership. "Don't wait up." As he walked out, his phone buzzed. A message from Crystal. Wearing the red dress you bought me. Can't wait for everyone to see us. XOXO. A slow, predatory smile spread across Declan's face. Lauren's absence wasn't a problem. It was an opportunity. He had been parading Crystal around at private clubs and quiet dinners for months. But tonight was different. Tonight, he would bring her into the spotlight, into his world. He would show everyone that he was a man unbound by convention, a man so powerful he could have his perfect wife at home and a spectacular mistress on his arm, without consequence. The art world, with its pretentious veneer of sophistication, was the perfect stage for such a brazen act of defiance. He thought of himself as a modern-day Medici, a patron of the arts. Tonight he intended to purchase the collection's centerpiece, a stunning abstract by Kean Monroe titled Elysian Fracture. The purchase would be a declaration of his cultural dominance, and having Crystal there, a living, breathing trophy, would only amplify the message. He didn't look back at the woman on the chaise lounge. If he had, he might have seen the flicker in her calm, grey eyes, not of sadness, but of something far more dangerous resolve. As the heavy penthouse door clicked shut, Lauren slowly sat up. She picked up her phone, her fingers moving with practiced speed. She scrolled to a contact saved under a single initial P. She typed a short, simple message. "Pierre, I'm coming tonight after all. Please ensure the arrangements are as we discussed. It's time." A reply came back almost instantly. "Of course, Ariadne. We are ready." Lauren stood walking not to her bedroom, but to a different room at the end of the hall, a study Declan never entered, deeming it her little hobby room. Inside it was not the room of a dilettante. It was a command center. One wall was a screen displaying real-time data from art markets in London, Hong Kong, and New York. Bookshelves overflowed with rare auction records and monographs. On her desk lay a set of architectural plans for a new museum wing. She opened a locked drawer and pulled out a simple, elegant navy blue maternity dress from Bottega Veneta, and a string of pearls that had belonged to her grandmother. They were real, of course. Everything in Lauren's life was real. It was Declan who was living in a fantasy. She had let him believe she was a simple academic's daughter, a quiet mouse. It had been a useful cover. The truth was, her father hadn't just been a professor. He had been a stenciler of the Boston stencilers, a family whose old money fortune was so vast and discreet it made Declan's tech wealth look like lottery winnings. And she hadn't just inherited their money, she had inherited their eye, their passion, and their most valuable secret. A collection of art so significant it could sway the market, all managed under the legendary anonymous pseudonym known to only a handful of people in the world, Ariadne. Tonight, Declan wanted to show the world his power. Lauren smiled a cool, chilling expression. He had no idea what real power looked like. But he was about to find out. The Gagosian Gallery in Chelsea was less a room and more a cathedral of modern art. Soaring white walls, polished concrete floors, and lighting so precise it made the air itself seem expensive. The crowd was a curated menagerie of New York's elite hedge fund managers, with bored-looking wives dripping in vintage Cartier, celebrated architects, gaunt fashion designers, and the fearsome art critics who could kill an artist's career with a single, well-phrased insult. The air buzzed with pretentious chatter and the clinking of champagne flutes. When Declan Shaw arrived, a hush fell over the room, followed by a tidal wave of whispers. It wasn't his presence alone that caused the stir. It was the woman clinging to his arm. Crystal Vance was everything Lauren was not. Where Lauren was muted elegance, Crystal was a supernova of manufactured beauty. She was poured into a skin-tight scarlet dress that left little to the imagination. Her hair was a cascade of platinum blonde extensions. Her lips were plumped to an almost comical degree, and the diamond necklace around her throat, a recent gift from Declan, was so large it bordered on parody. She was young, barely 23, with the wide, hungry eyes of someone who couldn't believe her luck. She was a walking, talking embodiment of new money, and in this temple of old-world taste, she stuck out like a neon sign in a monastery. "Declan, darling," she purred, her voice a little too loud. "It's all so white." Declan squeezed her hand, a smug grin plastered on his face. He loved the attention, the barely concealed shock on the faces of his peers. This was power. "It's called minimalism, Crystal. It's to make you focus on the art." "Oh, right," she said, nodding as she scanned the room. Not at the paintings, but at the people clocking the designer gowns and recognizing faces from page 6. Gavin Price, Declan's paunchy business partner, approached them, his eyes darting nervously from Declan to Crystal. "Declan, good to see you. And this is Crystal Vance," Declan announced, pulling her closer. "A very talented artist liaison. She has a remarkable eye. I'm mentoring her." The lie was so thin it was transparent. Gavin forced a smile. "Of course. A pleasure. I was just talking to Beatrice Fairfax from Art Forum. She seems particularly interested in Monroe's work tonight." He gestured towards a severe-looking woman with a sharp bob and sharper eyes who was scribbling in a small notebook. Declan's ego swelled. Beatrice Fairfax, the most influential and feared art critic in the city. Her presence meant this was indeed the event of the season. "Excellent. Let's not keep her waiting." He steered Crystal towards the gallery's main wall, where the exhibition's crowning jewel, Elysian Fracture, was displayed. The painting was immense, a chaotic yet beautiful explosion of deep blues, violent slashes of crimson, and delicate veins of pure gold leaf. It was a masterpiece of controlled chaos, radiating a raw emotional power that seemed to quiet the room around it. "Wow," Crystal breathed, her brow furrowed in confusion. "It's messy. My nephew could do that." Declan chuckled, a condescending, patronizing sound. "That, my dear, is why it's worth $8 million. It's not about what it looks like. It's about what it means. It's about the artist's struggle, the deconstruction of form." He was parroting a line he'd read in the exhibition catalogue on the way over. He spotted the gallery's director, Pierre Dubois, a distinguished man in his late 60s with a neatly trimmed silver beard and impeccable taste. Pierre was a legend, a gatekeeper to the highest echelons of the art world. His approval could make a collector. His disdain could break one. "Pierre," Declan boomed, striding forward and clapping the older man on the shoulder, a gesture of familiarity that made Pierre flinch almost imperceptibly. "Magnificent show. Truly magnificent. Monroe has outdone himself. Sure." Pierre said, his voice a smooth, polite baritone with a hint of a French accent. His eyes flickered briefly, and with professional distaste over Crystal. "We are pleased you could join us." "I wouldn't miss it," Declan said, gesturing grandly at Elysian Fracture. "I'll be taking this one, of course. Have my assistant wire the funds in the morning. We can discuss a small discount for old times' sake, eh?" Pierre's expression remained placid, but a careful observer would have noticed a tightening around his eyes. "The piece is certainly the highlight of the collection, Mr. Shaw. However, there seems to be a misunderstanding." Declan frowned. "Misunderstanding?" What misunderstanding? I have the highest bid. My office contacted you last week. Indeed, Pierre said smoothly. And as my assistant informed your office, the piece was never for sale. It is a commissioned work here on loan from a private collector. Declan felt a prickle of annoyance. He wasn't used to being told no. He was Declan Shaw. He didn't bid. He acquired. On loan? From who? Everyone has a price, Pierre. Name the collector. I'll double what they paid. This was his power play, a public display of financial muscle. He wanted everyone to hear, to know that his resources were limitless. Crystal looked on, her eyes wide with adoration. He was so powerful, so in control. She squeezed his arm, whispering, "Tell him, baby." But Pierre Dubois did not look intimidated. He looked amused. "I'm afraid that's impossible, Mr. Shaw. The owner is not interested in selling. They are particularly attached to this piece. In fact, they are the patron who discovered Mr. Munro 5 years ago, when he was still an unknown artist in a Brooklyn loft." A wave of murmurs rippled through the onlookers who had gathered to watch the exchange. The anonymous patron of Kian Munro was a legend in the art world. They were known for their unerring eye for picking brilliant artists years before they hit the mainstream. They went by a pseudonym, a single name whispered in reverent tones at auctions and gallery openings, Ariadne. To be Ariadne's collector was to be at the absolute apex of the art world. Declan's face began to flush with anger and embarrassment. He was being publicly denied. "This is absurd. Who is this Ariadne, some reclusive old fossil hiding behind a name?" "Let me speak to them." "That will not be necessary," Pierre said, his gaze shifting from Declan to a point just over his shoulder towards the gallery's entrance. A small, knowing smile touched his lips. "Because she has just arrived." Declan turned, a sneer ready on his lips, expecting to see some formidable battle-axe dowager. The sneer froze, then melted into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Standing in the entrance framed by the stark white archway was his wife. Lauren entered the Gagosian gallery, not with a bang, but with the silent gravitational pull of a celestial body. She hadn't made an entrance. She had simply arrived, and the room almost unconsciously tilted on its axis towards her. She wore the simple navy blue maternity dress. It was understated, yet the exquisite cut and fabric spoke of a quality far beyond the flashy labels favored by the new money crowd. Her only jewelry was the heirloom pearls, which glowed with a soft luster against her skin. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, elegant chignon, and her face was almost bare of makeup, accentuating the clarity of her intelligent grey eyes. She was visibly pregnant, and she carried it not as an ailment, but as a quiet source of strength. She moved with a serene, unhurried grace, her hand resting gently on her stomach. The whispers that had followed Declan and Crystal now died into a stunned, breathless silence. The contrast between the two women was brutal. Crystal, in her garish red dress, suddenly looked cheap, loud, and desperate. Lauren, in her quiet simplicity, radiated an aura of authentic, unassailable power. She wasn't seeking attention. She commanded it by her very presence. Declan felt the blood drain from his face. His carefully constructed reality was fracturing. What was she doing here? He had left her at home, the dutiful sick wife. Her appearance here now was a flagrant act of disobedience. A cold, furious rage began to simmer beneath his shock. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, abandoning Crystal and striding over to Lauren, grabbing her by the elbow. He tried to steer her towards a secluded corner away from the prying eyes, but she stood firm, immovable. "You should let go of my arm, Declan," she said, her voice low and steady, yet carrying an unmistakable edge of steel that he had never heard before. It sent a shiver down his spine. He released her, as if her skin had burned him. "I told you to rest," he sputtered, trying to regain control. "You're not well. You shouldn't be here. You're making a scene." "Am I?" Lauren's eyes swept over the room, calm and assessing. They briefly landed on Crystal, who was now shrinking under the collective gaze of the crowd, her bravado evaporating. Lauren's gaze held no anger, no jealousy, only a cool, dismissive pity, which was somehow far more devastating. "I feel perfectly fine. In fact, I haven't felt this clear-headed in years." Beatrice Fairfax, the critic, had her pen moving like a hummingbird's wings. This was better than the art. This was a drama, a power play unfolding in real time. She recognized Lauren as Declan Shaw's quiet, almost invisible wife. She had never given her a second thought. Now she was mesmerized. There was something in the woman's posture, in the directness of her gaze, that was utterly compelling. Declan tried a different tack, his voice a harsh whisper. "We will discuss this at home. You will go home now. You are embarrassing me. You are embarrassing us." Lauren finally turned her full attention to him. The serene, gentle woman he thought he knew was gone. In her place was a stranger, someone with eyes as old and unflinching as a marble statue. "No, Declan," she said, her voice clear and resonant in the suddenly silent gallery. "I don't think we will. I think we will discuss this right here. You wanted to be the center of attention tonight, didn't you? Well, you have it." She turned her back on her husband, a gesture of such finality, it was like a slap in the face. She walked away from him, moving with purpose towards the center of the room, towards Pierre Dubois, and the magnificent painting that Declan had so arrogantly tried to claim. Crystal, now completely abandoned, looked back and forth between Declan's apoplectic face and Lauren's regal back. The diamond necklace suddenly felt like a lead weight, a collar branding her as the fool in this inexplicable play. She started to realize with a dawning, sickening horror that she was not a player in this game. She was just a pawn, and she had been moved onto the wrong square. Declan stood frozen, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The entire room was watching him. He was the great Declan Shaw, the tech titan, the master of the universe. And he had just been publicly dismissed by his quiet, unassuming pregnant wife. The foundation of his world was cracking, and the real earthquake had not even begun. He watched helpless as Lauren approached Pierre, the gallery director, who was now beaming at her with a look of profound respect and genuine warmth. "Pierre," Lauren said, her voice ringing with an easy authority, "I apologize for my delay. I had a few matters to attend to." "It is no matter at all," Pierre replied, bowing his head slightly. "The guest of honor is always permitted to be late." He then raised his voice, ensuring everyone in the gallery could hear his next words, the words that would act as the trigger for Declan Shaw's complete annihilation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pierre announced, his voice filled with theatrical flair, "may I express my profound gratitude to the patron of this exhibition, the brilliant eye behind the rise of Chian Monroe, and the generous benefactor who has loaned us the magnificent Elysian fracture. It is an honor to finally welcome her here tonight. Please, a round of applause for the one, the only, Ariadne." The name hung in the air, electric and charged. Ariadne. For a moment there was only stunned silence. The crowd looked from Pierre to the pregnant woman in the simple blue dress, their minds struggling to connect the two. Ariadne was a myth, a phantom collector of immense wealth and impeccable taste. She was whispered to be an elderly European heiress, a reclusive Hong Kong billionaire, a secretive Middle Eastern prince. No one had ever imagined Ariadne to be Lauren Shaw, the quiet wife of a loud-mouthed tech bro. Declan's mind went blank. The sound in the room compressed into a high-pitched whine. Ariadne. It was impossible. A joke. A cruel, elaborate prank. He looked at Lauren, at her calm, placid face, and saw the truth. He saw the years of quiet study in the library, the auction catalogues he'd dismissed, the hobby he'd patronized. It wasn't a hobby. It was an empire. A slow, scattered applause began, led by Beatrice Fairfax, who was now grinning with the predatory delight of a journalist who has just stumbled upon the story of the decade. The applause grew, swelling into a genuine ovation. They were not applauding Lauren Shaw, the wife. They were applauding Ariadne, the legend. Lauren inclined her head slightly, a gesture of regal acknowledgement. She then turned to the massive painting Elysian Fracture. Kian was in a dark place when he started this piece, she said, her voice carrying easily through the rapt gallery. She spoke with the intimate knowledge of someone who had been there. His mother had just passed. He felt his world was breaking apart. I told him not to fight it. I told him to paint the break itself, to find the beauty in the fracture. She pointed to the delicate veins of gold leaf that ran through the chaos of blue and red. This, she said softly, is kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. It's based on the idea that the object is more beautiful for having been broken. The breaks are part of its history, a testament to its survival. Her words were a masterclass in art theory, but they were also something more. They were a parable. Every eye in the room now flickered between the painting and Declan. They understood. He was the break. Declan felt 100 pairs of eyes on him, each one a pinprick of judgment. He felt naked, exposed, a fraud stripped bare in the cathedral he had intended to conquer. His brash attempt to buy the painting now seemed pathetic, the act of a clueless child trying to buy his mother's love. He had stood in front of this masterpiece and seen only a price tag, a status symbol. She had looked at it and seen its soul because she had helped create it. He finally found his voice, a strangled, desperate croak. Lauren, what is this? What are you talking about? She turned to face him, her expression devoid of emotion. It was this absolute lack of feeling, not anger, not hatred, just a chilling emptiness that terrified him the most. I am talking about the truth, Declan, she said calmly. Something you have a rather loose relationship with. You introduced me to your world as the daughter of a simple academic. You were not wrong, but you were not right. My father was Professor Alistair Stensler, but you, in your infinite arrogance, never bothered to ask which Stenslers. You saw a quiet girl and assumed she came from a quiet life. You never thought to look deeper. She took a step closer, and he involuntarily took a step back. My family has been collecting art for over 200 years. She continued, her voice slicing through him. Not as an investment, not as a status symbol to hang on the walls of a glass box in the sky, but as a passion, a legacy, a responsibility. The money you are so proud of, the fortune you built with Nexus Dynamics. My trust fund, which I have not touched since the day we married, earns more in interest in a single fiscal quarter than your company's net profit last year." A collective gasp went through the room. Crystal, standing forgotten near a sculpture, felt a wave of nausea. She had hitched her wagon to a man she thought was a god, only to find out he wasn't even the most powerful person in his own marriage. "The name Ariadne," Lauren explained, her gaze sweeping the room before settling back on Declan, "was my great-grandmother's. She used it to buy pieces by artists like Picasso and Matisse before anyone knew their names, often supporting them directly so they could afford to eat. I have tried to honor her legacy. I find brilliant struggling artists, and I give them the one thing they need most: freedom. The freedom to create without fear of rent or reputation. Kean Monroe is one of those artists. This painting is not something I own. It is a piece of his soul that he has trusted me to protect." She then delivered the final devastating blow. She looked directly at her husband, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet every person in the gallery heard it as if she had shouted. "And you, Declan, stood in front of it with your protégé." She said the word dripping with icy contempt. "And you tried to buy it, to hang it on your wall as another soulless trophy. You are not a patron, you are a predator, and you are no longer welcome in this world, and you are no longer welcome in mine." If Lauren's reveal as Ariadne was an earthquake, her next words were the tsunami that obliterated everything left standing. Declan, his face a mottled canvas of rage and disbelief, tried to reassert his dominance. It was the only way he knew how to operate. "This is a private matter," he snarled, taking a step toward her. "You are my wife. You will come home with me now, and we will sort out this insane performance." Lauren didn't flinch. She stood her ground, a small, still point in the swirling chaos of his unraveling. "You seem to be operating under a number of grave misconceptions, Declan. So allow me to clarify. First, I am not performing. I am correcting the record. Second, I am your wife, but that is a temporary condition. And third, I will not be going anywhere with you, ever again." She turned slightly, addressing Pierre Dubois, but ensuring her voice was loud enough for all to hear. "Pierre, my apologies for conducting personal business at your beautiful event, but it seems it is unavoidable. Could you have someone from security escort this woman?" She gestured vaguely in Crystal's direction, not even gracing her with a look from the premises I believe she is trespassing. Crystal's face turned white. She looked at Declan, her eyes pleading for him to fix this, to do something. But Declan was paralyzed, a statue of impotent fury. Two discreet but very large security guards materialized and began walking towards her. Humiliation washed over Crystal. She was being ejected like a common party crasher. Without a word, she turned and fled, her red dress a slash of shame as she disappeared through the doors. Declan watched her go, the last vestige of his public triumph scurrying away. He turned back to Lauren, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You will regret this. You have no idea what you've just done. The prenup is ironclad. You'll walk away with nothing. I will ruin you." A faint, pitying smile touched Lauren's lips. It was the smile of a grand master, watching a novice move a pawn into a fatal trap. "Ah, the prenuptial agreement," she said, as if remembering a quaint detail. "I was wondering when you'd get to that. You were so proud of it, weren't you, your high-powered lawyers from Skadden Arps, ensuring that your assets were protected from the simple professor's daughter." She paused, letting the silence stretch, drawing every single person in the room into the vortex of her narrative. "Another misconception, Declan. You see, I agreed to your terms. I let your lawyers draft the entire thing, with one small exception. I insisted on adding my own fidelity clause. A very specific, very stringent one. Your lawyers thought it was amusing, a romantic notion from a naive young woman. They barely glanced at the sub-clauses. She looked him dead in the eye. The clause states that in the event of infidelity, proven infidelity, the entire agreement is rendered null and void. And the definition of proof, as outlined in subclause 4. is rather broad. It includes public appearances that cause reputational harm and emotional distress. It includes financial records of gifts, apartments, and travel. It includes, for instance, a man bringing his mistress to a major public event and introducing her as his protégé in front of 200 witnesses, including the city's most influential art critic. She gave a subtle nod towards Beatrice Fairfax, who nearly dropped her pen in sheer, unadulterated glee. This wasn't just the story of the decade. It was the story of her career. Declan's blood ran cold. He remembered the clause now. He'd dismissed it as sentimental nonsense. "My lawyers will tear that apart," he blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Will they?" Lauren countered, her voice dangerously soft. "You see, that's the other thing. The lawyers who drafted that clause for me weren't just any lawyers. They were from Sullivan and Cromwell, the firm that has handled my family's estate for the last century. They are the best estate and marital law attorneys on the planet. Your lawyers at Skaden are excellent at corporate mergers, Declan. But in this arena, they are children playing with wooden blocks. While they were protecting your few $100 million, my team was protecting a dynastic fortune. And in doing so, they also protected me from you." The finality in her voice was absolute. He wasn't just losing an argument. He was losing everything. The money, the status, the wife, it was all an illusion. He had been the kept one all along, a plaything. For a woman so far above him, he couldn't even comprehend the distance. But Nexus Dynamics, he stammered, clinging to the last pillar of his identity. "That's mine. I built that." "You did," Lauren acknowledged. "With a significant seed investment of $20 million. An investment you thought came from a venture capital fund called Helicon Growth Partners. Another little fiction, I'm afraid." She let the information settle in the stunned silence. Helicon Growth Partners is a shell corporation, one of many I use to manage my more speculative investments. I was your first and largest backer, Declan. I owned 30% of your company before you even hired your first employee. And as of tomorrow morning, when news of this scandal breaks and I divest my shares, I imagine the value of your remaining stock will be significantly diminished. After all, what is a data security company whose founder is proven to be so reckless, so indiscreet, and has such poor judgment? It was a complete demolition, a systematic strategic annihilation of his entire existence. She hadn't just checkmated him. She had revealed that he was never even playing the same game. He was a piece on her board, and she had just swept him off it. Declan Shaw stared at his wife, the mother of his unborn child, and for the first time, he truly saw her. He saw the brilliant, calculating mind behind the gentle eyes, the iron will beneath the serene exterior. He had thought he'd acquired a priceless work of art, but he'd been a fool. He had married the museum, and she had just evicted him. The Gagosian gallery emptied out, not in the usual leisurely drift of satisfied patrons, but in a frantic buzzing exodus. The drama that had unfolded within its white walls was infinitely more compelling than the art. Before the last valet had even brought a car around, smartphones were glowing with the headline. Beatrice Fairfax had typed with the fury of a concert pianist in her final crescendo, and her article published on Art Forum's website less than an hour after Lauren's final words was a nuclear detonation in the heart of New York high society. Titled, "The Titan and the Trophy." Shaw's public implosion and the unmasking of Ariadne. It was a masterwork of journalistic savagery. It captured every nuance: Declan's smug entrance, Crystal's cheap glamour, Lauren's quiet gravitas, and the brutal systematic demolition of a man who thought he was a king, only to learn he was a court jester. The article didn't just report the events, it contextualized them, weaving in the legend of Ariadne and the sheer scale of the Stensler family's quiet old money empire. By midnight, it had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. The story was too perfect, too deliciously ironic to be contained. Declan stumbled out of the gallery into the flashing glare of a few opportunistic paparazzi who had gotten the tip-off. He shoved past them, his face a thunderous mask, and threw himself into his waiting car. The ride back to the penthouse he had once considered his castle was a silent torment. The city lights, which he usually saw as jewels laid at his feet, now seemed to mock him, cold and indifferent. He awoke the next morning to the cacophony of his own ruin. His phone, lying on the marble nightstand, was vibrating incessantly, a relentless swarm of notifications. Texts, missed calls, news alerts. He ignored them, his head pounding, and turned on the large screen in his bedroom. A financial news channel was on, and the image made his blood run cold. The ticker for Nexus Dynamics NXD was displayed next to a stark, plunging red arrow pointing violently downwards. NXD plummets, 62% in pre-market trading. The Chiron screamed, amid founder scandal and massive share dump by mystery investor. Mystery investor. He felt a bitter, hysterical laugh bubble up in his throat. Ariadne. Lauren. She had not only exposed him, she had financially executed him. The call from his board of directors came at 9:00 a.m. sharp. The voice of his partner, Gavin Price, once a conspiratorial ally, was now glacial. "Emergency board meeting. Our office. 10 o'clock. Don't be late, Declan." The line went dead. He walked into the Nexus Dynamics boardroom, like a man walking to his own guillotine. The long, polished mahogany table was lined with the faces of the people who had once lauded him as a visionary. Now their eyes were filled with a mixture of fury and contempt. They were not angry about his infidelity. They were furious at his recklessness, at the catastrophic damage he had inflicted on their shared investment. "The reputational damage is catastrophic," the chairman said, dispensing with any pleasantries. "Our clients are in the data security business, Declan. They value discretion stability. You have shown the world that you possess neither. You are a liability we can no longer afford." Declan tried to fight, to bluster his way through it as he always had. "This is a personal matter. It has nothing to do with the company's performance. It has everything to do with it." Gavin Price cut in his face, red with anger. "The stock is in free fall. Our largest institutional investors are calling, asking if the company is being run by a hormonal teenager. The Ariadne you humiliated is the silent partner who owned 1/3 of this company. You didn't just cheat on your wife. You betrayed your primary shareholder in the most public way imaginable. It was corporate suicide." The vote was a mere formality. By 10:30 a.m., Declan Shaw was a CEO in name only. By noon, a press release announced his immediate resignation for personal reasons. His social death followed just as swiftly. Calls to his so-called friends went to voicemail. An attempt to book his usual table at Per Se was met with a polite but firm, "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully committed for the foreseeable future." He was a ghost haunting the life he had built. While Declan's world imploded in a blaze of public humiliation, Lauren operated from a calm, quiet center. She had moved into a suite at the Carlisle Hotel, a temporary sanctuary, while the renovations on her newly purchased Upper East Side brownstone were completed. The suite was her command center. Dressed in comfortable silk pajamas, she sat not on a chaise lounge, but at a large desk, a laptop open, a team of lawyers on a conference call, all while occasionally rubbing her swollen ankles. The physical reality of her late-stage pregnancy was a constant grounding presence amidst the strategic storm she was orchestrating. "The divestment is complete," said her financial advisor. "The funds have been transferred to the holding account for the foundation." "Excellent," Lauren said, her voice calm. "And the statement for the press, ready to be released at your command, Ms. Stensler," replied her lead attorney from Sullivan and Cromwell. The plan for the Ariadne Foundation was not a reactionary move. It was the culmination of a lifetime of planning a legacy she had intended to launch for years. Declan's betrayal had simply provided the dramatic, undeniable impetus to accelerate the timeline. She had spent years quietly mapping out its mission, identifying gaps in arts funding, and building a framework for a charity that would create real, lasting change. An hour after Declan's resignation was made public, Lauren's team released their statement. It was a masterpiece of controlled narrative. It confirmed in stark, emotionless terms that Ms. Lauren Stensler had filed for divorce from Mr. Declan Shaw. But the bulk of the text was dedicated to a far more significant announcement: the official launch of the Ariadne Foundation, endowed with an inaugural gift of $500 million from Ms. Stensler's personal fortune. The statement detailed the foundation's two-pronged mission, providing freedom grants to gifted but under-resourced artists and funding comprehensive art education programs in public schools across the country. It reframed the entire story. The salacious details of the divorce were instantly eclipsed by this act of breathtaking philanthropy. Lauren was no longer a victim. She was a visionary. She had taken the ugliest of public spectacles and transformed it into an engine for cultural good. The media narrative pivoted on a dime. Headlines changed from "Billionaire's messy divorce" to "the birth of a philanthropic powerhouse." Art world journals analyzed the potential market impact of a collector of Ariadne's stature becoming a public patron. Society columnists who had been sharpening their knives for Declan now wrote glowing profiles of the brilliant, mysterious woman who had outplayed him at every turn. A few days later, settled in her new brownstone, a magnificent home filled with warm wood, towering bookshelves, and the quiet dignity of history, she oversaw the careful uncrating of her true collection. A small, exquisite Berta Morisot painting, bought by her great-grandmother, was hung in the nursery. As she directed the placement of a stunning Helen Frankenthaler canvas in the library, her assistant brought her a tablet. An email came through a secured channel, "Miss Stensler. It's from him." Lauren took the tablet. She saw Declan's name in the sender field. The subject line was a single, desperate word: "Please." She stared at it for a moment, her expression unreadable. She felt the gentle kick of her baby, a small life waiting to begin. She thought of the fracture, the deep, painful break. And then she thought of the gold. With a single decisive tap of her finger, she deleted the email unread. He was a piece of her history, a testament to her survival. But he had no place in her future. 6 months later, spring had arrived in New York, a gentle reprieve after the city's harsh winter. It breathed life back into the concrete, coaxing cherry blossoms into bloom in the parks, and casting a soft, forgiving light across the cobblestone streets of Soho. Here, far from the cold, intimidating grandeur of the Chelsea art scene, the Ariadne Foundation was celebrating its official launch. The gallery space was a converted brick warehouse, its industrial bones softened by warm lighting and the vibrant energy of the art that adorned its walls. There was no velvet rope, no guest list scrutinized by stone-faced guards. Instead of champagne, guests sipped artisanal ciders and prosecco. Instead of caterers balancing trays of complex hors d'oeuvres, there were long tables laden with cheeses, breads, and fruits, encouraging people to gather and converse. The air was filled with the low hum of genuine excitement and the sounds of a live jazz trio playing softly in a corner. The crowd was a beautiful mosaic young paint-splattered artists, talking animatedly with distinguished university professors, community organizers laughing with museum curators, and wide-eyed students seeing their own work professionally hung for the first time. At the heart of it all moved Lauren. She was no longer the spectral figure from the Gagosian, nor the embattled wife. She was simply fully herself. In her arms, nestled in a soft grey sling against her chest, slept her 3-month-old son, Alistair Stensler. He was a warm, solid weight, a constant comforting presence. Motherhood had softened her edges and fortified her core, giving her a deep, settled calm that radiated from her like warmth from a hearth. Her gaze fell upon the room's centerpiece, hung on the largest brick wall under a dedicated spotlight. Elysian Fracture, the painting that had detonated her old life, now served as the cornerstone of her new one. It looked different here, surrounded by the raw, hopeful work of the Foundation's first grant recipients. Its chaotic beauty felt less like a scream of pain and more like a hymn of resilience. Kian Monroe, dressed in a simple black shirt and jeans, stood beside her. The whirlwind of the past few months had made him an art world superstar, but in Lauren's presence he was still the same thoughtful, intense artist she had met in a dusty Brooklyn loft. He was now the Foundation's first artist in residence, a mentor to the younger artists she was now championing. "I still can't believe it," he said, his voice low with emotion as he stared at his creation. In Chelsea, under all those cold lights, it felt like an accusation, like it was on trial. Looking at it here, it feels different. It feels like it's home. "It is home," Lauren affirmed softly, her hand instinctively stroking Alistair's downy hair. "It's where it was always meant to be. It was never meant to be a trophy, Kian. It was meant to be a testament, a story. A story you gave me the courage to tell," he added, finally looking away from the canvas to meet her eyes. "Thank you, Lauren. Not for the fame or the money, but for seeing me when I was invisible. You didn't just buy my art. You believed in my voice." "Brilliant voices should be heard," she replied simply. "That's all the Foundation is, an amplifier." As if on cue, a young woman with bright, nervous eyes and a streak of magenta in her dark hair approached them. She clutched a sketchbook to her chest like a shield. "Miss Stensler, I'm Sophia Reyes." She was one of the first recipients of the Foundation's 4-year college scholarship. "Sophia, it's so wonderful to finally meet you in person," Lauren said, turning to give the girl her full attention. "Your portfolio was extraordinary. The judges were unanimous. Your charcoal portraits have such life to them." The praise brought a deep flush to Sophia's cheeks. "Thank you. I just wanted to thank you. My parents, they came here from Ecuador. They work 2 jobs each. Seeing my art on a wall like this." Her voice cracked with emotion. "And college, It was just a dream. I'm going to be the first person in my family to go. Because of you." Lauren's smile was genuine and deeply felt. She shifted Alistair slightly in his sling. "No, Sophia," she said, her voice gentle but firm, her gaze holding the young artist's. "It's because of you. It's because you stayed up late after your shift at the diner to fill that sketchbook. It's because you found a way to buy supplies when you barely had enough for the subway. All I did was open a door that should have been open for you all along. You're the one who has to be brave enough to walk through it, and I have no doubt you will create incredible things." She had built a world where a talent like Sophia's would not be left to wither in obscurity, that she thought was a legacy far greater than any collection. Miles away in a sleek but soulless rental apartment, high above the Hudson River, Declan Shaw stared at a tablet. The divorce settlement had left him obscenely wealthy by any normal standard, but in the stratosphere he once occupied, he was a pauper. Worse, he was irrelevant. An entertainment news site had a photo gallery of the foundation launch. He swiped through the images, each one a small, sharp twist of a knife. He saw the art, the diverse crowd, the palpable joy. Then he landed on a photo of Lauren. She was smiling, holding their son, standing in front of that painting. She was surrounded by people who weren't looking at her with the fear or avarice he had commanded, but with genuine admiration and affection. She wasn't just beautiful. She was luminous, radiating a power he had never known. The power of creation, not acquisition. He poured himself another glass of whiskey, the cheap blend burning his throat. He remembered the smug satisfaction he'd felt walking into the Gagosian with Crystal on his arm, the thrill of his own perceived audacity. How could he have been so blind? He had looked at Lauren and seen a delicate porcelain vase, a beautiful empty object to decorate his life. He had never once considered that the vase might contain the ocean. His rage had long since curdled into a hollow, aching emptiness. He hadn't just lost a wife and a fortune. He had lost the chance to know the most incredible person he had ever met, and it was a loss entirely of his own making. Back in the Soho gallery, the evening was winding down. Lauren stood before Elysian fracture one last time, gently rocking her son. The deep blues of the painting were like a stormy sea, the slashes of crimson a memory of pain. But the gold was what held her gaze. It was not a cover-up, not an attempt to hide the damage. It was an illumination of it, transforming the breaks into the most beautiful part of the piece. She looked down at the peacefully sleeping face of her son, his small hand curled around her finger. Declan's betrayal had been the most violent fracture of her life. But from that break, this new life had emerged. From the ruins of a marriage built on lies, she had built this foundation, a house of truth and opportunity. She had found her purpose not in avoiding the breaks, but in healing them first, her own, and now, in a small way, the world's. The legacy of Ariadne, the secret collector, was secure. But a new one, the legacy of Lauren Stensler, the mother, the mentor, the builder, had just begun. And it was infinitely more beautiful for having been broken. Lauren's story is a powerful reminder that the greatest strength is often the most underestimated. In a world that rewards the loudest voice and the most arrogant display of power, she proved that true influence is built on intelligence, integrity, and quiet resolve. Declan Shaw saw his wife as a beautiful object to complete his collection, but he failed to see the woman herself, the brilliant mind, and the formidable legacy she held in silence. Her triumph wasn't just in exposing a cheat, it was in reclaiming her own name and transforming her personal pain into a public purpose, building a foundation that will empower others for generations. She turned her life's fracture into a masterpiece. What did you think of Declan's ultimate fate? Was it justice served? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by Lauren's incredible story of strength and strategy, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their own hidden power, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice, unexpected turns, and the quiet heroes who change the world. Thank you for listening.